your host, Isasipingo Simdingi, here at the Young Researchers Hub, where science and the public become one. Today, we're having a conversation with Bizo Luviwe Bomela, who is a graduate of the University of Forte and University of KwaZulu-Natal. He holds a bachelor's degree of social science from Forte University, an honors degree in sociology development, where he researched on African intellectuals and the development of indigenous knowledge systems. He enrolled for a master's degree at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in 2018, and studied the traditional and spiritual roles of African women in Xhosa society. From his MA thesis, he is developing a module and traditional spiritual theory as an emancipatory tool for women. He is currently serving as a subcommittee member on gender for South African Youth Council. Presently, he is working on his PhD proposal on medical pluralism and indigenous nutrition in a capitalist society. Bizo is a traditional healer, a poet, a songwriter, a winner of SABC2 Litsele Poetry Competition, and a member of the Golden Key International Honor Society. In 2014, he contributed to the research and writing of Emerging Voices Volume 2, a Department of Higher Education project that focused on curriculum renewal within the post-schooling sector. He has been a researcher and an assistant researcher on different fields, and he has publication on his LinkedIn where he focuses on history of political stability and conflict in Zimbabwe, marginalization of TVET students in neoliberal times. Bizo, welcome to Young Researchers Hub. We are happy to have you.
How
are you today?
Ndiyaphila mazalena khona ninjani?
Ndiyaphila Jolana, ndiyaphila. Thank you for honoring this invite, and thank you for giving us your time. Allow us to tap into your research. I understand it was a very spiritual journey, and in order for us to have this, we needed the people who gave you this research to allow us to have this conversation. So when you go back today, please thank them for me, and that I appreciate their go ahead for having this conversation. Bizo, you're researching on a topic that I think many of us would love to know more, because we have had conversation on gender. We have had conversation on gender equality and the injustice that comes with it. And I think most of the time we have focused more on the workplace, how we relate to each other in relationships and marriage. And so it has always been among those nuances when we discuss gender. And here you are today, you're saying, let's look at spirituality and the traditional roles of women in a Xhosa society. Please take us through your introduction of the research you wrote.
Excuse me. Joachim, ngicela siqale senze ngolu hlobo kuqala.
Okay.
To people who do not understand is isingoni, or what is colloquially colonially known as isingoni. Ndicela banixolele. I'll now and then I'll use my mother tongue, which is Xhosa. Like I said, that the project is not even my project. It was given to me. I was given a mandate by my feminine ancestors to do the project because they felt like they're not represented within the academic spaces. No one bothers to research on their role in society. So ndicela siqale senze ngolu hlobo ndibameme okwenzela into yobana xa ndisenza imbodede ndithetha napha napha babe benam nokunqanda ukwenza imbodede oko. So ndicela ke senze ngolu hlobo, ndicela ucamagusha ke kubantu abakhulu, ndicela ucamagusha kubantu abadala, kwiinkonde neenkondekazi, kubahle nabahlekazi. inkosazana namakhosikazi ndiyacela ukusho sicela ecosibele khetho kumnyama kuvela ukhanya kusuka amashwa kuvela amathamsanqa kwindlu kantu kwindlu yabangoni kumakhosi akwaZulu kumakhosi aseSwatini kumakhosi amampondomise kumakhosi aseBathenjini kumakhosi abathana bathakazi kumakhosi amandawo ahamba nenzuza kumanani kubalozi mathatha njengomantshomane kubantu bomlambo ndiyacamakusha ngicamakusha kumarhuduluke ngicamakusha koZulu osikhuni nhlatyana ogade kontsibo chambashona bonjuzo washota ongqone bakamntu amzomhlophe kuzomlamo tethe ziluhlaza zinyongodo ngoyini namhlanje ngenza abantu abathi ndiyenzile obhodla inyama imfengetyekezile ndiyacamakusha camakusha kumazizo jama kasitshata fukathi osandlula obodwa ebomshipo omoyisa usebakhulu omfazi mambele madoncisela intsana zibaphesha komkhulu onkomo zilekhaya ngoba ziswela belusa camakusha kumanqarhwana oyinza abarharha bozidolo ohlabela kwangqoko bidance book incwadi amabholo chosichosi kumanqarhwana oyinza abarharha bozidolo ohlabela kwangqoko bidance book incwadi amabholo chosichosi kumaqatha odikela nontswayi bonambike embositokotsotsolo amaqatha alifoni ombo yimbo washilepile samina omkhala mvalavala kamasiba sibathenje indlela amakhala kwadalasile nyikunyitsile iqhudu lensimbi mpholonyisa eziphezulu abasezantsi bayazoyika bathi ziyabasinikela camakusha kumampondomise ojolo oqhingi bemphankomo ngonyathelo lomkhafazo osimorho kuze umbetha amathole enoni kwabo basengetheni amaweni emiqolombeni ezindongeni secamakusha kwabendlela secamakusha kwimifula ngemifula kumabandla ngamabandla kwimnqobo ngeminqobo secamakusha camakusha ke lagcwabene emonto lagcwabene ebhetso lagcwabene kwaZulu lagcwabene ebhayi siyacamakusha kwimifula emikhulu ke nqolo ngabarha nqolo kwale nqothuthisa nqolo umkhomazi nqolo umzimvubu qolo umfula ijukskey umfula inxuba siyacamakusha phezu kwetyhume siyacamakusha emkhomazi kwaZulu siyacamakusha sinobechosipele khetho mnyama kuvela ukhanya usuka amashwa kuvela amathamsanqa the work is not mine like I said before the work belongs to the feminine ancestors I never thought about researching on gender in the African context I had always had an interest in policy and development within the post-schooling sector. Hence the work that I've done, the research that I've done previously within the polling sector, the post-schooling sector. So I needed to recognize those people. Behamba nami ndingathethi indoda xa ndithethayo noba ndiyaphazama ke uyabona kodwa babe besecaleni nokunqanda ukuphazama oko singaqhubekeka ke Jorha siqhubeka mazaleni.
All right. As I said, Bizo, when you were doing this project and we have had this conversation, me and you, and I was crossing fingers throughout the week that they allow you. Just a brief to the viewers at home, we almost did not have this session because we had to sibaxenge abantu abadala to allow us to have this session. Bizo, you research on a topic that looks at the spiritual and traditional role of Xhosa women in the broader context of society and the gender studies. I would like you to take us through your introduction and to lay a foundation for us on your study.
Okay. Zininzi oqala izizathu that led me. Okay, hey, this English thing is going to be problematic. Understand Islam, but I'll have to try for the sake of people who don't understand Islam to guys because there are a lot of reasons. I think that there's just a few reasons amongst many that have inspired me to conduct the study. Fees must fall played a part. The roles of what is termed as Black radical feminism, which I am very highly critical of, led to that. Because from that also the anger and the rage, which is justifiable by young Black female students who were questioning some of the patriarchal practices, and like I said, like that their anger is justifiable. But my question has always been that when we say men are patriarchal, African men are patriarchal, we then need to question the origins of patriarchy. That's what one of the objectives that this study was looked at. One of the aims of the study was look at Landuga as at patriarchy and its origins. So I always said, let's look at patriarchy. Let's look at how at the context of our own society, and look how things are done and how things were done before, and then see if we can be able to say that patriarchy. If you say when we argue that African men are patriarchal, and then we should ask the question, the origins of patriarchy. And patriarchy stems from from colonization and imperialism, and Christianity was used as a tool to instill a patriarchy in society. And for me, it is important to look at this, mainly because the moment you examine or you explore the origins of patriarchy, you are then able to see that the problem with African societies or with men in African societies is not actually men, but actually the systems put in place. So which came as a result of colonization, and they were enforced. Remember that gender relations changed as a result of colonization. It changed. They changed as a result of missionaries coming to society. So basically, that's one of the reasons why I was evoked to then pursue the study. Secondly, I did realize that at home, xa kusenziwa imicimbi yekhaya, ngakumbi amasiko, awukwazi ukulenza isiko udadabawo engekho. Alikwazi uqala isiko liphele isiko udadabawo engakhange athethe. But I've realized that actually odadabawo, they being sidelined, odadabawo, they being marginalized by men. And also when that happens, we need then to ask the question, isizathu sisukela sithini isize kabani? How did we get there? Because we're coming from a society that recognized the role of women, that respected women. So which is why it is then important to then ask the question, what went wrong? What went wrong? Where did we go wrong? So that we can be able to unearth the real cause of the problems that we're facing today. So those are just the few reasons amongst many. And I then had a conversation with someone about how traditional practices and traditional practices, actually traditional spiritual protocols are aimed at suppressing and oppressing the voices of women in society. And I said, actually, this is wrong. It's actually the other way around. But the spiritual, the spiritual protocols of the African continent have been tampered with because of Ilanduka, because of as a result of colonization. So basically, if I don't know if you know the resolutions of the Berlin Conference, but if you're familiar with the resolutions of the Berlin Conference in the 1800s, before the scramble of the African continent, one of the resolutions was to divide men and women, tamper with the spirit of the continent, because the drive behind their power and everything that they have, it is their spirituality. And that's what the colonizers did. So, and then later on, I could hear the voice saying, actually, Indoba Usenzelele project, so that our role in society can be recorded and remembered by generations and generations to come. And that, I did that with the understanding that that the work that we do, the research project that we work on at Lunduka in the academic spaces do not reach the masses. So it is then important also to not just write and throw your work into the internet, hoping that our people will have access to it. I think it's important that we become vocal at homes about these things, and say, actually, this is not how things are done. Because naxa kusenziwa imisebenzi ekhaya kuba kwixesha lelantuka lebhekile yenxa apha kuhlelwa khona zintombi namadoda ekhaya kuxoxwe ngendlela yokwenza isiko, and isiko lilawulwa ngumoya, alilawulwa inyama, uyabona. And therefore to marginalize women and sideline women during traditional ceremonies, that's the disrespect to the ancestors. It is the disrespect to the creator, because xa sisenza isiko sinqula ukuqamata sibiza uqamata ibe nguye ozawulanduka ozawusinikeza amandla akhokhele umsebenzi, so that umsebenzi wekhaya singawenzi ngenyama, because injongo yakho kubulala, injongo kuphilisa. So andiyazi noba ndiphendule nombuzo.
Yes, you did. And as you were talking, I'm reminded when I was reading the book, I just forgot the author. She's from Zimbabwe. She writes the book, These Bones Will Rise. And in that book, she mentions that on the first Chimurenga, the person who was directing the soldiers was the spiritual medium, Nehanda, which was a woman. And going forward, they had to go to her to request direction as to how to move forward as we're going to Umvukela. And that speaks of the role of women. And then she talks about how now, as we're moving forward and journeying to the conversation, to the later years, where the British comes in and the colonizer comes in, that shifts. She becomes in the background now. She's no longer in the light. And then it goes to my second question that I have for you, because you mentioned in your background that African spirituality is also rooted in traditional ideas, beliefs, values, and institutions acquired and disseminated, where societal, cultural groups and individuals order their lives and interpret their experiences, giving them a unique identity, which is, it's Wilson who says this in 2005, and you quote this in your background. And it then leads me to the question that says, how has our ignorance and dismissing these traditions have affected us?
Yeah. Look at the continent now. look at the continent now. Look at issues of gender-based violence. Look at traditional leadership. Look at political leadership. Uzolani Mkiva was spoke on, was it ETV? I think it was, I don't know which program it was on ETV, where he was promoting this, calling for this Ancestor Day. And he said, one of the reasons why we are where we are today, one of the reasons why we don't have a direction, one of the reasons why I would argue is that the problem with the ANC is that it doesn't have an ideological orientation. It's ideologically disorientated. It's because we no longer consult the spirits of our ancestors. As a have relied on logic for everything that we do. We rely on logic. Yes, colonization played a part. It has messed up the African systems of living. That's why we where we are today. But the transition from colonialism or from apartheid to democracy, it happened in such a manner that it didn't eradicate the system itself. So the foundations of democracy are embedded in colonialism. So until we eradicate those systems, then we might then find true liberation. if true liberation is not a myth. So we are where we are today because of colonialism. We are where we are today because of the neoliberal agendas that do not adopt African systems of living, that are not aimed at developing methodologies that are aimed at emancipating women, eradicating gender-based violence. So even if you look at gender-based violence, for example, which is very prevalent in society currently, we do not use African methodologies. We do not use we don't look at we do not look at gender-based violence through the African lenses. So we look, for example, for theories like radical feminism. Radical feminism has been around for years. What has it done in trying to deal with gender-based violence? Feminism has been there. But also the problem with those theories is the fact that when feminists were rising, white women, in fact, let me just put it plainly, when white women were rising against oppression from their men, they didn't have black women in their mind. So they were not aiming, even feminism was not aimed at eradicating capitalism. White women wanted to sit in the same positions as their men. They didn't care about when white men were lynching white women, and when white men and men, when whites were raping African women, white women didn't care. So I don't understand how we then rely on methods that are not aimed at liberating us. Even the context in which feminism is rooted, it's far away from our context, from the African context. So it's important that we develop our own systems. I mean, our own tools of emancipation to answer the problems that we facing. So for as long as we do not do that, then we're far away from dealing with the problems that we're facing and coming up with solutions that are relevant.
Thank you, Bizo. As we having this conversation, we've had this conversation about Ingqumbo Yeminyanya after I read the book. And I am reminded of the lady that is there as the main character who was dismissing culture, traditions, and everything else, and led to the demise of all that happened in the book. If anyone has not read the book, I think it's a very important book to read, Ingqumbo Yeminyanya, and to understand some of the things that put us where we are today. As this young generation that we are now, reflecting on that lady and the partner and her husband, and where we are now, what were some of the findings you had, or some of your main findings you had of the role of Xhosa women in the spiritual traditional way? Because I do believe that what the lady did on the book, it was due to lack of information, and this extent that I didn't know even myself that Dadobao plays such a critical role when there's umsebenzi ekhaya. So please take us through on what are some of the roles in terms of your main findings of Xhosa women in the general society.
Okay. Abantu abangomama so basically they're the ones who protect families, more especially children. They are naturals. So we are all raised by women. I mean, we are all raised by women. Women raise children every day. Even when I go to work or go to school, I always see women accompanying their children to ECDs, to school, and I always ask myself, but so that's one thing that really bothers me, and it's something that I like. I'm very observant of. I don't do it consciously. I think it just happens. So women have always been there. They have been the backbone of society, even pre-colonialism. Women have built cities in the African continent. Women have established churches in the African continent, and are amagqirha who are anti church or and anti umthandazo would dispute this and say actually into yokukhonza is enabelungu, which is actually not true. Women have always been spiritual warriors. Women have led societies as kings and queens. We know the role of Umkabayi in the context of KwaZulu. We know the role of Queen Mojaje as the rainmaker in is it Botswana or Bapedi? I'm not sure if it's
I think it's Bapedi.
Botswana or Bapedi nation. It's Bapedi, ne? I think yes, it's not such as Bapedi. We know the role of Umamokaki. She was fighting the British wars alongside Unkosi Jongomsobo, Umaqom. Umama uNontetha Nkwenkwe, she was umthandazeli. She would lay hands on people, she would pray for people, she would heal people, both men and women. Umama uLantuka uNontetha Nkwenkwe also called for unity and fight against the apartheid system, and she was captured by Amabulu and took her to a mental institution in Pretoria, saying that she was crazy. That story is not well captured and well recorded for obvious reasons. So women still perform their roles as amagqirha, and yazi kuba igqirha xa lingenile ekhayeni labizwa sithi mazokukela umsebenzi ootata bayazola.
Yes.
Kuthiwa mhlekazi, and umhlekazi actually is a gender neutral term. Kumanyelwa kulo. And it's even this idea of saying igqirhakazi is something new that came with this call. And there's Western gender constructions. Igqirha, whether yindoda okanye ungumama, ungumhlekazi. Okay. So umhlekazi is a gender neutral term. So igqirha lisawungena when a traditional healer comes into a home to lead a certain ceremony that requires igqirha or a traditional healer to lead, or isangoma, whichever term is appropriate to you. Men bow down, they listen and be guided, because they know that they're not listening to the person, but they're listening to guidance from the ancestors, because the person has that person has Landuka has a close connection with the spirits of the dead. So those are some of the vital roles that women still play in society. They still build homes. They still make sure that families are fed, even though kungasalinywa. But women play a huge role in Landuka in stock files. Stock files are usually led by women for sustaining Landuka their families. So those are the major roles that women play in society. So those are some of the findings. So basically Bazinko is Amakaya, and they were saying actually even during the interviews that without them there are no homes. So that phrase that says in Xhosa, akukho khaya ngaphandle komama. Nendoda engenamfazi ayinexabiso ekuhlaleni. So those are the important roles that women still play in society, as leaders, as nurturers, as healers. There's a study that was done by Professor Ojong in UKZN from the Faculty of Social Sciences and the Humanities. I don't remember the title, but actually the finding of the study was that women are actually more spiritual than men, looking at ubungoma. in the area of KwaZulu. And that power comes with the power of leadership, power of healing, power of nurturing. They are born with it. So, which is why sometimes I'll just make an example and say, in the Rai cheetah, women always know. Sometimes they don't know how, because we've lost these knowledge. We don't know, but they will tell actually that actually you cheating. Some will actually tell you that you just had sex with someone, get away from me. So that's the spiritual power that women have. But then again, that's a spiritual power that they were stripped of to cause the divisions, to cause the trouble that we find ourselves in today. So the phrase that says "induku ainamzi" in the context of isiXhosa, it speaks to gender semantics. It speaks to a call against gender-based violence. That umfazi akabethwa, that indoda isebenzisa induku zomlomo. So you speak, you verbalize, you sit down and try to solve problems by engaging the person that you have a problem with, by talking to your woman and not hitting them. Induku ainams, indoda isebenzisa induku zomlomo. So when someone says the African continent has always had men who are patriarchal, then we should ask ourselves, where do these phrases come from? I'm sure there are many. That speaks against gender-based violence that we see today. So women have various important roles to play in society. Odadobawo umzekelo bayangena ebuhlanti baphothe intambo xa ikubizwa koluka. They're still the ones who lead initiation yamantombazana, which is ukuthomba, preparing women for womanhood, so that when last. So one of the reasons why last is because anisathombi isiko lokuthomba naliyeke. And people will say, but it is expensive. We do understand it's expensive. It is really expensive now because abantu abasenazo inkomo. But what we're doing now is not negotiating with ancestors, because you do negotiate with ancestors. Actually, the context is different, and they're very understanding. Actually, they say things have changed. We are poor now. We have nothing. How do we then do this ritual differently to prepare women, young women, for marriage, so that bazolast, so that bangashiywa ngamadoda? So akusenziwa nentambo, ungenziwa nentambo kuyabandisa endodeni, and that's a fact. Kuyabandisa endodeni, umuntu usayishadile abande emlankeni, abande emzini, kufuneka into mama makabuye. Sometimes they become violent, women become violent because izihlwele, they demanding that kufuneka enzelwe amasiko wabo. And when I say they become violent, I'm not saying that it is the ancestors who make the woman violent. But what happens is that when ungenzelwanga isiko lakho, then what happens that then becomes a disconnect between the spirit and the flesh. Once umoya ushiye umzimba will function on its own without being guided by the spirit. A lot of things happen. People become irrational. They do not think straight. They can't even control their anger. This is one of the reasons why we have gender-based violence. A lot of reasons are why people. We experience. We experience gender-based violence on a daily basis. And I've always maintained the argument that some of the reasons are spiritual. So you're tempering with the spirit of that person, not with her spirit only or he has spirit only, but with the spirit of the ancestors, because it's probably that. So once you do that, there's likelihood that ancestors will become annoyed. Sometimes, depending on because spirits that react differently kwezi zinto zenziwayo, which is izichitho nelantuka nekorobela. Uyabona? So uza omnye umuntu uzamtyisa usuke lapho usuke ube nezothe kuwe because wenze into engahlambulukanga, wenze ubusathana. Uyabona? But it also happens that umntu otyiswa ilantuka ivamna uba violent because you're tampering with their spirit. So this is one of the reasons why we experience gender-based violence. Another major one is ischitho. Ischitho is created to destroy a relationship, be it whether you're in marriage or you have a boyfriend. And usually the focus is on males because of them being masculine and physically stronger than women. So uve kuthiwa indoda iyambetha umfazi wayo. But we know that Bizo doesn't have the history of violence towards women. Later on, 6 years later in marriage, Bizo ulandukile ungomba umfazi. Because kukho intwazana ethile adibene nayo emnqwenelayo. Whether inqwelo yomqusha okanye imfunela kuyo, yabona for whatever reasons, ahamba emntwini okanye mhlawumbi uxabane nomntu as a wife. Uxabane nomntu athi umqhela kakubi ndizawuchitha laa mtshato. And then kwanje utyiwe egqirheni kuyofuna ilantuka isichitho. Uyabona uchitho laa mtshato. Then the man becomes violent towards the wife. Abethe ulantuka inkosikazi yakhe okanye iqabane lakhe. Uyabona? And then we say, and then we'll create these hashtags which are sometimes necessary and say men are trash. And whenever people spoke of ilantuka, brought trashism into a dialogue, I would say actually, when you say men are trash, ask the question, but why is it that men are trash? People will say men rape women, men beat women, men murder women. And then I would ask the question, why is it that men murder women? And someone said during the when the trashes narrative was start running, they said because men are trash. And then you have to ask the same question: why is it men are trash? So the problem here we're dealing with we're dealing with spirits. We're dealing with spiritual beings here. Human beings are spiritual beings. So when is that this dislocation between the spirit and the flesh? Apho khona ilantuka ingqondo izilawulayo because we rely on ingqondo, which is rationality, for us to do things. That's where the problem is. So until we do spiritual cleansing, Isa, for the women who were lynched, for the men and women who were killed during the transatlantic slave and thrown into the sea, for the women who died in wars, who were raped in wars, for the women who were raped and killed by the ANC cadres and exiled. Those are the issues that we don't even talk about. Because their graves are still turning. I mean, their bones keep on turning on their, in their graves. So that means even when their spirits come back home, they come back home angry. Because some of them were raped by their uncles and killed by their uncles. So we need to do that. We need to cleanse the spirits of the dead and then deal with the issue of spiritual restoration. So for as long we do not deal with the spiritual, then we're not going to go anywhere. So this is the reason, for example, why you social work studies and psychology studies would argue that more often that a woman who's been raped before is more likely to be raped 3 times and 4 times more and even 10 times. Why is that? Because xa umuntu edlwengula ngumuntu onomoya ongahlambulukanga, uyamngena ngumoya ongahlambulukanga. And therefore, after you've been raped, you carry the spirit of that person who raped you. So nabanye abanomoya ongahlambulukanga, they'll want to rape you. So how do we then solve the problem? Before we became amaqoboka, before we became Christians, and all these charismatic churches and we have, before we became graduates and become better and these people that we've become, a person who's been raped before would be cleansed. You cleansing the spirit so kungahlambuluki ongene ngwaso umuntu okudlwenguleyo. So until we solve these issues using the traditional spiritual approach, until we look at these problems using the traditional spiritual approach as a method and the lens of looking at these issues, we're not going to solve these things. It's not going to happen. So the manner in which we do things needs to change. So which is why in the recommendations I would say, I'm saying that traditional spirituality need to be adopted as an emancipatory tool for women. It needs to be developed. I'm working on that. I'm sure people will, when it's published, people will review it and extend the arguments. We need to look at traditional spirituality. Decolonization is vital, and it needs to be done in a very radical manner. But unfortunately, seemingly, decolonization is being hacked again. So now that there's money, everyone wants to jump into the field of decolonization. It's like, well, actually, we want to decolonize, but then again, the people who are doing that do not have the vision. They have the degrees, they have the masters, they have the PhDs, they are professors, and not everyone who's a professor and everyone who's a doctor or has a master's is capable of doing the work. They can't even teach some of them. So those are the problems we're facing currently. So that's one. I mean, that's one of the recommendations. Decolonize the curriculum, which is why Ukanyisila in one of the poems asked the question, what's the degree if I was not abantu and speak to the needs of Kwantu? What's a degree if it can't speak to the problems that people are facing in their society, looking contextually at the problems? I mean, at the problems we're facing, using African tools, Afrocentric tools of analyzing our own issues and coming with our own solutions. What Mbeki has been saying, that African solutions for African problems. That's an African Pan-Africanist perspective, actually. So we need to. Those are the things that we need to do. So for as long as we do not revive the spirituality of the African people in dealing with the problems with the facing society, if we looking at the issues of equality, whether it's in the workplace, in the field of politics, wherever, women are not going to be emancipated, and women need to realize that. But also the problem is the fact that people who are writing on these issues have no appreciation of the history and the culture of the African people. We celebrate, who's that woman who wrote we should all be feminists? What's her name again? Chimamanda was Adichie. The likes of Professor Phumla Gola, those are people who were trained through the Western curriculum that we all went through. So sometimes when they look at these issues, they do not, the theorizing does not begin at home. We adopt what is already existing and then say, this is what needs to be done. So that doesn't help us in solving the problems that we're facing. Feminism is not a solution to African problems. It has never been, it will never be one because of how it is rooted. It's rooted on capitalism. It is rooted on racism. So that's why it needs to be challenged. But not only in writing, also in practice. Theory needs to make practice. Practice is what is needed. I don't know if there's a will, and I don't know if Mklambi will ever be to to get to the promised land, looking at how things are currently.
Bizo, I am lost for words for the many parts you have touched on as you answer. But the first part I want to go back to is how you describe women in their role. And I'm reminded of the Xhosa saying, ethi amagqobazana ngalala endlini konakele, and it captures it captures of how important women are in the broader society. But also you go on to touch on issues of gender-based violence that are as a result of the evils that we do as people in society, touching on issues of isichitho and all of that. And it shows how deep the problem is in our society. And I know this one, that you've been an advocate of the cleansing of our society as a whole. And I remember you once had an argument that we need to, as the indigenous South African people in South African context, that spiritual leaders from different tribes come together and find a way on how to cleanse this country in order for us to move forward. And that debate came when there was the whole debate about bringing back capital punishment as giving death to people who have committed certain things. And your argument was, but it still doesn't solve the problem. And you mentioned some of the spiritual issues that have engulfed our continent. Now, as we move further, and I'm watching time, because this is an important conversation that I think an hour is not enough. You mentioned in your study that the entrenchment of male dominance in terms of patriarchy, including in South Africa, plays a role in extending patriarchy, and which contributes to pushing women, African women, to the margins and stripping them of their traditional roles. And my question is, what would you suggest be done to undo this grave injustice to our way of life as Xhosa people, but also as a general people? Because now that the women are no longer playing their role, there are problems in our families. I don't want even to say in the broader society. In our families, there are problems. What would you suggest be done? We're already in the system of patriarchy. It's already dominant in our society. What can we do to move forward?
Cleanse the African continent.
One answer.
Cleanse the African continent. Restore the spirit of the people through cleansing. And whenever I raise this argument, one asked, how are we going to do this considering the fact we are a diverse society? That we are AmaZulu, AmaXhosa, Abapedi, Abatswana, Mandebele, Abesuthu, Abatwana, Abatwakazi. And my answer is that each and every nation has got its own traditional spiritual protocols. Each and every nation has got its own traditional leaders. I think one of the things that need to be done is to restore the power of traditional leaders, so that because and we know how they lost their dignity. And the media shows us each and every day that they don't have respect for our traditional leaders. The British Royal House gets a lot of respect from the media as compared to any other African royal kingdom or royal house. We know the reason for that. So we said cleanse the continent, restore the spirits of the people, But how do we do that when we are this diverse society that is also divided, knowing for the fact that they had to use the divide and rule, which led to the formation of the homelands. Put AmaZulu there, put AmaXhosa there, divide them into tribes. AmaXhosa, Aba, they're no longer Ngonis, Abangoni, the people who do not sin. Because before we are AmaZulu, AmaXhosa, and AmaNdebele, AmaSwati, Singabangoni, Abantu Abangoni, people who do not sin. Before. So the term Ngoni is a colonial term. Asingobe Ngoni, Singabangoni, Abantu Abangoni. But through divisions of colonialism, we are where we are today. So I would say AmaZulu have their own traditional spiritual protocols. They have their own king. Ngaphambilini, before all this mess, traditional houses or royal houses or kingdoms would have what is called itola lakomkhulu, igqirha lakomkhulu kanye isanusi, to look at royal matters. And royal matters were not just royal matters, were the matters of the nation, because the royal house looks at the issues of the nation. Indlu yakomkhulu enqadu ematshaweni oTogu, oGcaleka, oYinsa, ikumkani yakhona ijongana nesizwe sayo besebenzisa isiko esiXhosa to cleanse. After we've done that as AmaXhosa, as AmaNdebele, being guided by itola lakomkhulu isanuse okanye isangoma sakomkhulu, and then siphakamisa umoya kaQamata. I don't want to say to avoid it debates from people who are anti-umthandazo, siphakamisa umoya kaQamata, because as the person I am, I would say siphakamisa umoya wezithunywa. From my practice as a healer, we say siphakamisa umoya wezithunywa. Zona zikufutshane kumdala, to unite, because asizodibana ngasiko ngoku. Ezinye zezinto ezisohlulayo lisiko, because umzekelo ukuzalwa kukaMpondo noMpondomise abangamawele kwakhokelele ekubeni into yoba kubekho isizwe samaMpondomise namaMpondo, because uMpondo as the younger twin wanted the role of the bigger brother to become the leader of that society, because he was a twin. And he was not given that chance because he was a younger twin. He decided to go and form his own nation of Amampondo. So that means he had to do away.
I would never get on that.
Sorry, I think let me just mute the person. You can continue, Bizo.
So that means that he had to do away with everything related to Amampondomise. So now I'm coming to the issue that says isiko nesithethe has a way of dividing us as people, because indlela yethu yokwenza itheni ayifani. Kungako nje isiXhosa siye sahamba sithi imizi ayifani, ifane ngenhlanti kuphela. I mean ifana ngenhlanti kuphela. Maxa wambi uva abantu abangomama bevuma ingoma besithi nakhokho amaseko mathathu khawuphume intombi uthi gelekeqe, yabona, because indlela owenza ngayo kwakho ayifani ngendlela endenza ngayo kwami. Ngako nje ndisithi ke ngoku loo nto leyo ingafuna into yoba ikumkani yesizwe samaXhosa isebenzise isithethe nesiko lakwaXhosa to deal with the issue of cleansing. And then abantu bakwaZulu, ikumkani isilo samabandla sakwaZulu have to deal with abantu bakwaZulu and how to go about the cleansing, njalo njalo namaNdebele. And then when we're done with that, we can call umoya kaQamata, not that as nations, as persons, umoya kaQamata uzobiza, but for us to unite as a nation and say, Nkosi sikelele Africa, maluphakanyiswe uphondo lwayo imithandazo yethu. Uyaqonda? Now as a nation now, to try to unify the nation so that we can become one.
Mm, mm.
So
thank you, Bizo.
The restoration of traditional leadership is also necessary in this sense. But I'm not sure if traditional leaders would be able like to relinquish the power when necessary and say actually women should lead, as it was the case with Queen Zinga, Queen Mujaji, Queen was Asante from Asante from Ghana, and many others who have led, and also the queens of land of Kemet, what is now called Egypt. And actually, there's actually evidence to prove that these women have led societies before, and their sons will take over the reins from their mothers.
Thank you, Bizo. And I was so happy, but also so sad that I grew up in a time where there was ukumkanikazi noloyiso. And why I was sad is because I was planning to go and visit her because I wanted to have certain conversations with her from a woman, but also from a queen in a patriarchal society, and just uncanca kuye and dive. Anyone who has a comment or has a question can share their question or comment. We're about to close. The conversation is really nice, but there's has never been enough. Bizo, something that is very interesting as you were having this conversation, and as I was reading through your thesis, in your introduction, in the very beginning, you quote Uboy and Edward in 2014 that Xhosa female diviners, amagqirha, mentor men and women during spiritual initiation, ukutwasa, and lead patriarchal clans during ritual ceremonies. You further quote Uguzana in 2000, who writes in 2000 and contends that such Xhosa traditional and cultural custom and practices play a pivotal role in marginalizing and silencing women. An interesting question I then have was, do you think we should do differently? Because you're mentioning that the women are still calling or using patriarchal clans in carrying out all of this, which then Guza says this plays a pivotal role in their marginalization. So do you think we should do differently in order to unsilence and unmarginalize women?
I'm not sure if I captured your question.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, you're saying when the diviners are carrying out their job or their work, their calling, whether they're doing it between men and women, they're still, as you're quoting Boy, it's Boy who's saying this, that they still.
Yeah, I remember Bill and Edward.
Yes, they still lead all of this. During the ritual using patriarchal clans. So my question is, do you think that we should do differently? Maybe in my imagination would have been that we also uplift the matriarchal side of clans and not only rely on the patriarchal side.
And go over, yes.
And
go over, and I'm trying so hard to understand you.
Okay, let me. If we do not find each other after asking this way, we'll have to pass this question. So in my understanding, what Boy and Edward are saying is that when I go to Msam and the Ndithethe nabantu basekhaya, I am first. I'll start with my clans from my father's side, and then I'll continue to use other clans. And you're saying that this is the same way that amagqirha are doing it.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So you're saying that. So Boy and Edward are saying when they lead in Ngqolo, they're still using and leading it using the patriarchal clans, which is most definitely more.
Okay, the clan names.
Yes.
So are you talking about the fact that
yes. So what I'm asking is, so I'm asking, do you think we should do differently now and not only rely on one, but use both?
I do not see the reason why Otatobao shouldn't be mentioned when we what do we call it? Calling our praise names or praising ourselves. As Asiko is to Isa. In my acknowledgement, I don't know if you did check it. It mostly covers acknowledges women. Not because the study is a gender study focusing on women. Mainly because the study itself was guided by women. It was requested by women. But also at home, I do even ndiye bakwazi ukudlula osikhoma emhlatheni phakathi kwentsimbo chambashi but odadobawo ekhaya ndiyababiza onombini onomagungqu odulukazi at some stage during umngcwabo kamalume wam xa ndandilantuka xa ndandithetha I said ndaqala ndaxa ndithethayo wena ukulo nombini wena ukulo nomagungqu wena ukulo nobhulukazi wakulo bhulukazi mzukulwana kanowebhile nyana kanofanelekile. So that was even before I did Lantuka, I did the study. It was in recognition of women because they udadobao guys, udadobao, udade botata, yindoda yekhaya. It's Xhosa sicho. It's not even about manliness or masculinity or contesting masculinity or trying to be man. It's about leadership. It's about recognition. It's about the important role that they play. Odadobawo bayafana namagqirha. Ngaba bavuka namathongo emakhaya, ngaba baphilisayo. Xa kukho ingxaki kubizwa bona. Uyabona? So I would like to know how this was done in the past. I don't know if someone can do a study on that. Of how our Landuka I mean I would like to know how this was done in the past. Surely it was not done this way. Remember, sithi ezi ziziduko. Ziziduko siyazilanda ngeziduko ngoba kwathi sathini saduka. Izithole zethu zangaphambili asisazazi. Kungako nje singasazazi noba singabangoni because we've lost the knowledge. Remember that colonialism is violent. So all these systems were installed violently through violence. So through violence, evidence gets destroyed, lineages get destroyed, you lose information. Sometimes so the moment you lose land, you lose everything. The moment you lose origin yako, your source, where you come from, you lose everything. So true, for example, I'm discovering that actually I which is why ngobe ndithetha kuqala ndiye ndathi kumakhosi akwaZulu ndiyakhuleka amakhosi ndiyakhuleka edlozini. I've realized that actually I am more connected to the Zulu nation more than I am to the nation of Amakhosi. And now the Zulu ancestry is claiming me as their own. So this also made me question why ekhaya emthatha xa siyela ngene emfuleni siyokunqula emfuleni sinqula amakhosi namakhosazana alamkayo alwayo elamkeni emfazweni esoleke emlanjeni. Kukho ingoma ethi singabaphina thina singabembo basikhomba kwaZulu singabembo singabaphina thina singabembo basikhomba kwaZulu singabembo. That made me then question about abantu, why are they so bothered about the fact that someone said they from KwaZulu? And also itola lokuqala, which is isanusi sokuqala kwindlu kaRhodulu, igama laso nguZulu. Here's the two connections. There's a song. There's a song where people are disputing and refuting this the idea that they from KwaZulu or they have lineage or actually is directly linked to the nation of Amazulu. On the other hand, you have these people who say singamakhosi, they have unyana wabo oyisisanuse onguZulu. Something happened there. Now there's me, who's now being claimed by Ilanduka, by Amakosa KwaZulu. So meaning that anything that I knew before now needs to change, because indlela yami yokuthwasa is not going to be done the Xhosa way nor the Zulu way, because ithongo liyalanda lilanda, which is why there's a connection with Amaswati, which is why there's a connection with Amasai, which is why there's a connection with Amalemba from Zaire and King Kush wendlu kantu. So ngaphambili uToto Mkhulu benqula bathi sisizwe sikaKhushe. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Because we descended from East Africa with the descendant of King Kush of Landuka of what was called Landuka Kemet, now called Egypt. From the kingdom of the Nubians. So kukho izinto ezinjalo ngokonje nsithi indlela yangaphambilini andiyazi ba yisithini na. Uyabona? Andiyazi ba sisithini na, but asikho isizathu soba sixa sinqula omkhaba singababizi. Asikho isizathu sokuthi xa sinqula omama ugatye singababizi. Asikho isizathu xa sinqula isizathu soba ngoba singababizi olanduka oPhini Manjaji. And all these women contributed towards the development of these nations, contributed towards defending the nations. The case of Momokaki, who was fighting wars alongside Umena Kulanduka So there's nothing wrong with that.
Bizo, ixesha luchapha. I think the conversation you have brought, I think we need different series to unpack all of this. Why am I saying that? Is because there's a lot I'm learning from what you're saying that I didn't know. Now, I am a young girl who's getting to her prime age of whether you say marriage or whatever, and to someone. And I have no knowledge of whatever you're saying. And it means I could never be able to practice and do the things that I'm required to do because I am not equipped to do all of those things. So it means there's so much gap in our society, and especially when it comes to the traditions on how we carry them. There's a lot of disconnect. And I think it's very important that we do a thorough research on these things. And like you're saying, have a curriculum that is built on it altogether to allow us a chance then to carry the job forward. Because as I'm saying, there's so much that we still need to learn and take forward. And as I'm closing, before I close, I want you to then, if you have this, what are some of the research areas that you would suggest that we tap into as we continue with this study that you have now taken, which is, I think, it's very important.
Yo. The issue of gender, semantics, use of language when it comes to gender. I'm not even sure if I should be saying gender because there's a scholar from in Nigeria who is it? I think I'm not sure if it's on a new gear of Obama and Obama, but they say Yorubas don't do gender.
Okay.
So yeah,
That's
I'll send
interesting.
you the I'll send you the article. So actually, there's a group of African scholars who have written on this. I'll also send you the link to the book. Amongst many is Oyewumi, who also disputing this idea that Africa has always been patriarchal. So they came together. I think there's about probably 15 or 12 of them who have written a book that dispute these notions about how Africa was patriarchal. So basically, the study is focused on gender. So Obama and Obama, if not Onyegumi says actually Yorubas do not do gender. So we were never divided along gender lines. Kungako nje kukho mama umzekelo abakwaziyo ukusenga. Omama bamba ikhuba, intombi ezazikofola. I mean, imisebenzi enjalo yayingakhethi umuntu utheni, but also there were limitations because umuntu ongumama akolusimus amakhwenkwe akakhangatheli amakhwenkwe as much as indoda ingakhangatheli ilantuka into njani ilawule izinto zabantu njani. So yeah, so I think also we need to look at gender semantics so that they can be able to guide us on this issue, because a lot needs to be written on I mean, to prove that actually Africa was never a patriarchal society. And I think that knowledge could be able to empower a lot of people, because sometimes so when you are told that you are something, when you're told that you are trash, you become trash, which is why I always disputed this idea that we're trash, this trashist narrative, because it's also guided by feminist perspective. Trashism didn't change anything. Didn't create much of an awareness as far as I'm concerned. Maybe I'm being too critical. Maybe to some extent it did change the manner in which some men view women. But has the rate of gender-based violence dropped since the eruption of the trashist narrative? It didn't. It keeps on going up, which is why I'm saying that we're not examining actually the real problem, and we're not applying the right methodologies and trying to solve the problem that we say we are facing. So I think it's important to look at gender semantics. It's important to look at the way of schooling pedagogies that we need to use in trying to deal with these problems. So a curriculum needs to be reviewed. It needs to speak to our needs. We can't be learning about people's histories or the history of the Europeans. So we need an Afrocentric curriculum, and we say we're calling for a decolonized Afrocentric curriculum. We're not saying that we shouldn't learn. A comparative analysis and comparative studies are vital for one's intellectual development, but we cannot have a curriculum that is dominated by Western ways of doing and thinking. So that's the main problem. We also need to remember that for us to be these people that we are today, abelungu basebenzisa curriculum to change our thinking. So one of the methods, it was a religion through Christianity. So that division between Otata and Mama, it was done through Christianity, and also it is Christianity actually that said whereas as yon akomntu ngamiye pulpitini. So wonke umuntu unelungelo lokushumayela, because iziyoni understands that actually spirituality doesn't do gender. So
thank you,
yeah,
Bizo.
those are some of the issues that we need to look at.
Okay, I'm just going to read the comments and then give you the questions that have come through, and I would like you to be very brief on the question on answering. So, doctor, I don't know what to say to say Unokzolamden or Doctor Nokzolamden, but I'm gonna say umama. And not say doctor because doctor does. Ukhona umameni. Yes.
No, madlamini umuntu okulo makhulu lo wetywaka lo. Uthi madlamini.
So, Mama, please forgive me.
Actually. I'm excited.
I'll say Mama for me. Sorry, for me, I'll say Mama. I won't. I won't use the terms of this society. Umam Nokzolamdende is saying females play dual roles. Ekhaya yintombi irrespective of age. Uhamba ngentloko and has no boundaries. Emzini ungumama, she plays that role to nurture. She is the protector of the whole family. In fact, kungekho umama, alikho ithanca, or alikho ikhaya. So
wait, Isa, can't you bring it to close the session? We need that wisdom. Just 2 minutes, 5 minutes.
I don't think to join via Facebook, not via Zoom.
Ungena on Facebook?
Yes, ubhale ku Facebook. Akangenanga via Zoom. Oh my word, I would have loved to hear her, but she didn't get it. She didn't log in. She's on Facebook. She was live on Facebook. She was part of us on Facebook. But what your mama is saying to me, then I remember back at home, just to narrate a short story before Sivali, that I usually say to people, I did not learn feminism through the book or what it means to be a woman through a book. I used to watch my late grandmother and her position in our family, Umam Koto. That was the most powerful woman in that family. There were times where they will say a meeting will not go on if she's not around. And if a meeting has set without her, someone has to come and report as to what happened. And she will then decide whether they did correctly or not correctly. So, and these were my grandparents who had to come and bow down to her. And from that perspective, I learned how powerful her position was in our family. But obviously, as time evolves, I don't think other females have that power anymore. And so it's an emphasis on what Mama is saying. Mama that of the dual role that you play as a woman, both ekhaya nalapo uchadile khona. And then someone also commented that guys, we need to follow you. How can we contact each other from here? There's a lot I believe we can learn from your work. This is Upudluvo. I'll do the connection between the two of you. He's very grounded and he loves what you're talking about. And now I'll go to a question that we have from Uspoka's Madlom, which is Gunoludwe, Senemiak. One, she's asking, what would it mean for us as African if we were to cleanse? Two, what effective changes would that bring? And lastly, what singaphila njani xa singabuyela, considering the changing times in terms of development and technology advancement?
What it means to cleanse, ne?
What would it mean for us?
What would it mean to cleanse?
For us as Africans, if we were to cleanse?
And the changes that will bring.
Yes, and the changes that will bring.
Third question.
And then the last question is, singaphila njani xa singabuyela? I think xa singabuyela embo, or xa singabuyela and do all these things that you suggesting that we do, considering that we've moved far away from them and became modern people. Considering the changing of times in terms of developments and technology advancement.
To cleanse, ne? To cleanse is to purify, is to let go of the evil. Is to let go of the anger. ilifu elimnyama elisigubungeleyo. There's a dark cloud that is covering the African continent. And we cannot always blame colonialism as much as it has done a lot of damage. But imikhuba yamagqirha inefuthe elibi kwingxaki esijongene nazo. So whenever I think about cleansing, I was just thinking about amagqirha and the soft life abeza nayo neenyoka, uphilwa neenyoka yonke le mikhuba yenziwayo. Ukubulawa kwabantu, more especially killing of women, kuthathwa ilantuka i-genitals to create imithi yokwenza ubumnyama. Yabona? And that knowledge doesn't fall from the sky when isa okanye ayikhiwe elantukeni emhlabeni, ayombiwa njengathi kombiwa amagonso ayombiwa amazambane. That knowledge comes from the ancestors because sinezihlwele ezingahlambulukanga. Kungako nje bugqirheni xa ungenayo funeke uhlambulule umoya wezithole so that ukhokhelwe ngabantu abahlambulukileyo, because abanye babo bebesebenzisa imithi emdaka bebengamagqirha, abanye babethakatha bebengamagqirha bekhwela imitshayelo nazo zonke izinto ezenziwayo, behambe eBijolo nasebhadana nasempukane. Those are the issues that do not want to talk about as African nation. I don't know why. So you cleanse the spirits. Abanye babedlwengula, abanye babezizigwinta, abanye babethwele benenyoka phakathi kwamakhaya. So zezinye zezinto ezichitha imizi, which is why the cleansing process is important. Once you purify the spirits that guide you, because sometimes ezinye izinto ezenzekayo i-behaviors abantu asikwazi uzi-explain into yoba lo mntana ufuze bani. Which is why I also have a problem with this idea yokufuza. Because uyehova umuntu omdala ngokwakhe, when we say actually umuntu ufuzile, what we are saying is that ungenwe ngumoya womuntu wesiqhele sakwakho. Now the question is, lo muntu omngenileyo ngumuntu ohlambulukileyo na? It can't be just be that xa ubiza senza imikhuba kuthiwe hey umfuzile umthathile uyisemkhulu. Yayizizimbo zakhe ezi. What do we do about that? If abantwana bagile imikhuba kuthi bafuzile, the problem is that sinezihlwele ezingahlambulukanga ezifika zihlale ezikhangela indawo yohlala kubantwana bazo, but zifika zihlale ngomoya otheni ongahlambulukanga. You then therefore cannot expect that person to right elonkeni ekuhlaleni. So that's what cleansing lantuka would mean for us. And the change that would bring is that who would be purified, sense izinto ezithambulikileyo. But we cannot just cleanse and say zonke izinto zizawulunga. Which is why in city the restoration of traditional leadership, ukuvuselelwa kwesidima kwelantuka kwenkokheli zomthonyama kuyafuneka ibe zizizawukhokhela ukuhlala. Democracy is not helping us at all when it comes to these issues. Ukuthatha umuntu umfake esiseleni just because wonile akuncedi into. Izisele zigcwele ngoku. And there's an article that I read while I was because I'm also writing a book chapter on race and gender and its influence on political participation. A study that was done way back in 2009, it said actually 94% black men, African men, make 94% of landuka of inmates in the country. That was 2009. So ukuthatha umuntu eseleni uyomvalela doesn't change anything. Instead abantu bafika bafunda imikhuba. So here's approaches sisebenzisayo as isincedi. Baphinde babuye futhi bagele imikhuba. So nomuntu olonka osidlwe nguIsa nomuntu obuleleyo, in fact umuntu esawubanjwe ejele nokubanjwe into right nokubanjwe ngempazamo na esawuphuma ejele umuntu uyahlanjwa because ijele indawo ehlambulukanga nesenzo asenzele isenzo sahlambulukanga ukwenza into bangaphinde awuphinde lamkhuba awenzayo. So there are herbs for that. Yabona amayeza sinawo sasoniwe ngumdala andithetha ngamayeza olonka ukuthakatha okukhipha imikhuba. Yabona thetha ngamayeza okuphilisa esinawo. Yindalo lesinayo sayinikezwa ngumdala okanye sayinikezwa ngumndala. Yabona. So we should make use of those knowledges. But also the problem that we're having is that sinamagqirha angahlambulukanga.
Thank you, Bizo.
Azenza inkokheli. On the issue of Ibuyelambo, we cannot go back to Embu, but we can always take Embu to where we are today in trying to solve the problems the problems that we're facing. So I don't know what her idea of Lembo is. So
okay.
I think for me to be able to answer that question fully, I'd have to also have a better understanding of what Imbo means to her.
Okay, no, I understand. There's a person who raised her hand, Gallery. If you still have the question, I would like to give you a floor. The person does not have her name or his name, so it says Gallery 820. Okay, I'm not sure if they're still around.
He's still there. But, who's talking?
Hi.
Can you see me?
No, we cannot.
We can hear you. Can hear you.
We can hear you. You can ask your question or have your comment.
Okay. All right. No, I was just trying to acknowledge some of the points that Bizo came with, né? And also the part of the roles of females with society. Like those are very good points that he came with. And also I think
looks like we've lost him.
Yeah, I think we've lost him. Sorry about that. Bizo, I am so sad that even 1 hour, 1.5 hours is still not enough for us to have this conversation. And I think that speaks a lot into how important the study is and how many things that still need to be unpacked further. And I would like you to continue having this conversation and call you into task to do, if you can, you can do a 30 minutes video explaining some of the things. It's very important for the next generation and the current generation to learn certain things that are no longer there. And one of the reasons why I created Young Researchers Hub was exactly for this, for the public to learn certain things, for the public to be enlightened on things that have been hidden to us. So I am really calling you into task and begging you and asking abantu bakokweni to allow you to do those things and educate outside of Young Researchers Hub, to give yourself time when you're not pressured into writing or anything, even if it's for a month. I mean, in May, we're going to Africa Month, to do these videos and explain some of the things, and we can have a conversation on what some of the things I would wish also myself to learn, because you know how much I want to learn those things because of the break that has happened. You know my struggles I've had in terms of my spirituality and everything, simply because there was never a transfer of knowledge from one generation to the other. And when things were happening to me, I was found in a middle of nowhere, not understanding where I should go. Ndifuna ukubulela Jola, ndifuna ukubulela Qangeba, ndifuna ukubulela Mphankomo ngexesha lakho. And I hope this session allowed you to say what you wanted to say. And I hope I gave you the platform to say exactly what you wanted to say. I would like you to say your closing. I think they're calling me now to say our time is over. So can you quickly do your conclusion so that I can do mine? And we besicele iure kakade sesibetha kweyethu ngoku.
In conclusion,
yes. Kasitsho.
Manbulela bantu. There's nothing much to say actually. Like I think I've just covered everything. But manbulela bantu. Let me thank the people who took their time and bought data and used their money to watch this conversation. It really means a lot to to us. In conclusion, I think it's really important that we we invest our time and energy and learn about our own systems of living. Those who have the ability to write must write. Those who enjoy reading should enjoy reading and exchange that knowledge. But also when it's important that we investigate about things that do not understand, research about things that we do not understand, even the traditional spiritual protocols in from our clans, from our in within the African nation, instead of critiquing something that we do not understand.
Mm. Hi, Bizo.
By Professor Kola when they're writing. That's why I have a problem with all these Landuka, these so-called African feminist scholars. Is because I always say I've had this conversation with Choban. I don't know if Choban is online. That the problem that I have with feminists is that they do not have an appreciation of history and the culture of of the African continent. So, and to a certain extent, to a certain extent, I do understand. Abanye abantu bakhulele eLandkeni elokishini. I mean, suburbs. Bafunda ngesingesi, bafunda incwadi ngesingesi through Western Landuka methods. So that's those methods and those epistemologies or knowledges, they shape our thinking to a point that we look down on our own, or we don't even look investigate our own ways of Landuka of doing. I don't see you online. I don't know whether you're still on. Are you still online?
I'm still here.
Okay, so they don't bother to investigate about own ways of living. When people theorize, they do not start at home. They start from the West and then come at home. By the time you get home, you're already lost. So that's the challenge we're facing. That's why we do not now. There's this conflict between African Landuka, African feminist scholars, while others would say patriarchy has always been there. It has always been the organizing system within the African continent. And you would have Oyewumi on the other hand saying that actually this is not true. This is the way. And this takes me back to one of the dialogues that we had at UKZN. And I was asking the question about what are the origins of patriarchy? How do we locate, where do we locate the origins of patriarchy in Africa? And no one knows, like from professors from the gender studies language department, no one knew. And I said, actually, I said, let's go back. And they said, no, we can't go back. As a scholar, as a professor and a doctor, you can't tell me that we can't go back. There's a lot of knowledge available out there of how maths was taught way back. Various methods of teaching mathematics and various other studies. So you can't tell me as a professor that we cannot go back. I mean, we can't go back, which is why into the study I brought the fact that there's also various evidence, archaeological evidence to prove that women led societies. There's artworks to prove that. So there's artifacts to prove that. But because those who have monopolized the knowledge know not to touch on that knowledge and bring it to us. This is why some of the books that have been written about our own history are so expensive, so that we won't be able to afford them. Some of the books, for example, about my children, I saw it online, it was going for 700 rands. And also when you do research and read some of the work that has been done, by scholars from the diaspora, people in America. People in America have got more knowledge about history than we do. So that is problematic. So it's important that we those who have been have had the privilege of getting into university and acquiring these degrees should at least do justice. At least let's research about our own ways of living, our own ways of doing, so that we can contribute to knowledge production in within the African continent, and be able to disseminate that knowledge not only online but also like conversations that we have at home. Email by izingxoxo ezithetha ngezinto ezinje, sithetha ngolwimi so that kwenzela into yoba wonke umuntu osekhaya azokwazi into yoba uva into yoba yintoni le uthetha ngayo. Uyabona, awukwazi ufika edutya kundlambe naleni yam phezu kwenqabaka uthethe nge-epistemologies neelantuka ne-gender semantics, and abantu abazuyiva loo nto. Uyabona, uthetha ngolwazi lwemveli, uthetha ngesiko nesithethe. Uyabona. So even with economics, some of the economic systems, they've always been there. People have always been trading before capitalism. And this capitalism that we're so embracing and these neoliberal perspectives, they're not doing any justice to society. So the more we embrace them, the more we experience poverty and unemployment. Because capitalism doesn't care about the lives, about livelihood. So we should then work on projects that are aimed at developing the African nations for the betterment of society, for the betterment of generations to come. Into siyenzela thina siyenzela inzala yethu. So xa befika abantwana befika imeko yokuhlala inkenenkene sawuthi senze ntoni emhlabeni.
Yeah.
So ngalamazwi ke ndithi matholanye ngande kudlalana bekungangotethe ubumnyama kuvela ukhanya kusuka amashwa kuvela amathambisana camako.
Bizo, ndiyabulela ngongazenzisiyo, and I thank everyone who have joined in today, and I personally apologize that we had the session to more than an hour. However, spiritually, I felt that it was within a proper time to allow that. Nateka, please switch off your mic. So in that context of I cannot even put the person on the and mute their mic. Okay, so for me, this was a very personal journey with you to have this conversation. And everyone who's at home, thank you very much for joining in. It is here at Young Researchers Hub where we're having conversations that society has not had, where we'll allow researchers to unpack their research and share their own findings and recommendations. We will join you again next week. We have another amazing topic that we will unpack. And as if I knew, Bizo, that you would touch on some of parts of the gender-based violence, we are now transitioning to that part. And I think this was a path to allow us to get to that point. So what we discussed today will flow nicely to the next topic that we're having next week on Friday at 6 o'clock. Due to commitments, we're having again this one on Friday at 6 o'clock. And to everyone at home, and it's a long weekend, we have Freedom Day on Tuesday. Please keep it safe, sanitize, wear your mask, and make sure that everyone around you is safe. There's a pandemic out there, it's killing our people. And after this, there's still a lot we need to look at. And as Bizo would say, that we need to bring back our people at home spiritually and bring them back at home, because of how they were buried. It's also an issue that I think will, in the later stage, bring us troubles because certain protocols were not done. So from me, Isasipin Kosimtingi, thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy your beautiful weekend and you'll stay safe. Goodbye.